as Gordon just said, it is the first Sunday of the month. Did you remember what we do on the first Sunday of the month now? Honduras. Right. We have our Honduras Spotlight. And today's Honduras Spotlight is focusing on the street ministry that our partner ministry down in Honduras, Manos Extendidos, does. And so I'm just going to tell you a little bit about it. Alvin, who's the ministry director of Manos Extendidos, started just noticing that there were kids and people who live on the street in Honduras, and they didn't have enough food, and they didn't have enough clothes, and he just kind of started going down and making sandwiches and juice and handing it out, and just having a chance to talk to those. And these areas that he goes to are pretty dangerous. We would not go there without him. And gradually he has mentored a young man and his wife, and this is them there, and Natty is the young man and his wife Marta, and they are gradually taking over this ministry, and they try to get down to the streets once a month and do that outreach. It just really depends on their funds. And so what we did when we were down there was we gathered together and we made sandwiches at there, but you might recognize a few people there. So we got together and made sandwiches, and I don't know how many we made. It was like 180 sandwiches. And so then folks went down to the street, and Alvin gave some specific directions, and you had to obey those directions, and started passing those out. So you can see Anna, Alvin's the tall man with the hat on, and it was fairly orderly. And so I'm asking a couple of the younger members of our mission trip to come up and tell us how that whole experience impacted them and what it was about, share a little bit. So that is going to be Angie and Esther. Woo-hoo. Come on up.
Hello, just checking. So we wanted to share, there's just a little bit I wanted to add to what Shelley had said. Something about Honduras, it's extremely poor, as you've heard, but the dangers of living on the streets is not only from not having food or shelter or power or water, but they also have to be concerned because people will often kidnap those who live on the streets and steal their organs and then put them back on the streets to fend for themselves. They also have to be concerned because every 6 months the government does what they call a city cleanse, and they'll go down and shoot and kill any homeless person they see. So it's a very dangerous place, not just on certain roads, but everywhere is extremely dangerous for anybody that's living on the streets. So when we got together and we made all the sandwiches, we had a lot of fun with that part. I think I really enjoyed it. Pushing everybody, trying to make them go faster and faster. We had a little assembly line going, and Esther, what did you expect when we were making the sandwiches, what we were about to get into?
Well, I was excited and pretty much the same as any other ministry, just happy to help out and feed people who didn't have food.
We made several stops, but the first stop that we made was near a river. It was a very polluted river, and people seemed to come out of the shadows as soon as we were pulling up, and they all were screaming, Papi Alvin, as they came out of the dark shadows of the alleyway. They automatically knew to form a single file line if they were to get any food, and they also knew that the youngest person had to go first or they wouldn't get fed. So they automatically formed this lineup and were prepared to wait their turn. There was no fighting or squabbling. Everybody was extremely respectful of the pecking order that was set up for them. We came across a young boy, and you'll see pictures of him as they go through. He's about 7 in the blue pants. This young man, he was running around tickling everybody. He was a very happy child, but he didn't have any parents, and so others on the streets would look out for him to make sure he was safe. What was your impression of this first stop? What was it that caught your attention?
Definitely that little boy, and he had like a sister, and I remember seeing her, and she had pajamas on, and they were way too small for her, and they were so happy, and the respect they had for Alvin, and they knew the rules, and if they didn't follow the rules, that they weren't going to get their sandwiches, and everyone wanted hugs, and this little boy who didn't have anything just was so happy, and I couldn't believe that I'm so sad with the food that I have, and he was so happy with what he had, and it made me feel really bad about myself.
The second stop that we went to, we ran into a couple of people. There was one gentleman that was lying on the side of the road or on the steps, and he kind of pulled up his shirt to show us the scars that he had. Can't look at Sherry anymore. And he pulled up his shirt to show the scars where he had been stabbed, and he informed us that he had AIDS, so he wasn't able to get any treatment for that. So he was basically laying there waiting to die. At this stop, we also saw another couple, and this couple, they had gotten into a fight with somebody else on the street, and the gentleman was injured. And I believe Anna slipped him some painkillers while they were there talking to them. And Alvin had arranged to take him to the hospital the next day so that he could get treatment. And I believe Gordon was paying for that, or that's what the plan was. To go to the hospital there is a little bit different. You can't actually go get any help unless you have somebody willing to go to the pharmacy and buy the tools that you need, whether it be syringe or needles. You have to have somebody willing to go purchase those items and bring them to the hospital in order for you to have any kind of treatment when you get to the hospital. And nothing, of course, is free. On our third stop, we were walking down the street delivering sandwiches, there was a group of people kind of laying in boxes on the side of the road, and we were walking down delivering sandwiches to them with their dogs. And Esther, what did you think when you first saw this as we went down the road?
Well, I thought, these people are dead, like, it's freezing cold, they're laying in cardboard boxes, and they're just laying there completely still, and we'd poke them, and they wouldn't move, and their dogs just kind of looked at us, and you could tell, like, they have nothing. And in school, we talk about homeless people and, like, people that have nothing and live on the streets, and I'd just be like, oh yeah, whatever, like, obviously there's people that live like that, but then you go down there and you're feeding people who live in cardboard boxes, and I'm just like, wow, this is so real, and it just changes the way that you look at homeless people, and it's real, and yeah.
It doesn't go away. No. On the fourth and final stop that we made was mainly teenagers, and in this area we noticed a lot of them were sniffing glue out of pop bottles. And I realized when we saw this, and you could smell the glue all the way around, and I realized that there would be a purpose or a reason why they'd want to sniff glue. And I understand the need or the want to have drugs to try and forget of what your life is like. I can only imagine that's what you would need. So I asked somebody why people chose glue over something else. And they said, well, first, it's really cheap and it's really easy to get. But second, if you sniff glue, then you don't get hungry for 3 days. So that really turned my stomach. I really had a hard time swallowing that and picturing or imagining what that must be like just to avoid hunger pain that you would sniff glue. At this stop, how did you feel that they perceived us being there, Esther?
Well, they all wanted to talk to you. Like, they'd come up and they just talk at you in Spanish, and you just kind of tell them in broken Spanish, I don't speak Spanish, but then they just be like, oh, okay, and give you hugs, and they all wanted more. A lot of them wanted more sandwiches and extra sweaters, and we had to say no, and most of them were just like, okay, but some of them you could tell they really wanted and they really needed more food, but even though we couldn't give it to them, they were still happy, and yeah, it was.
At this stop is a location, there was a little girl there that was about 10 years old, and while we were there, I mean, she was wearing very, very short shorts. She had flip-flops on that were too small for her, and she was freezing. She was absolutely cold, and you think Honduras might be warm, but at night it's incredibly cold, especially if you don't have clothes on or very little clothes. At this stop, Anna felt compelled to give up her shoes to this young girl. And Esther decided that she needed to give her socks. What made you decide you needed to give this little girl your socks?
Well, I have like over 200 pairs of socks, and I probably brought 150 with me. And she had flip-flops on. They were torn and broken, and her feet were probably freezing. And I had like socks on, and I had so many more with me. And I thought, I can't imagine how happy this one pair of socks out of my 200 would make her feel. And when we gave her the socks and shoes, she was so happy. And
It was her sock.
yeah, I just felt like I have so much of these, I have to give her some of what I have.
I don't know about you, Esther, but this pile of garbage that you see here, the day that we went to do this, the day before, like the actual afternoon before we went out, we went to, I guess what you call the rich part of town, and went and ate fast food and you know, enjoyed some of the things that we're used to. And then when we arrived at this location, we discovered that every evening a dump truck comes and dumps all of the garbage from the fast food.
This was really hard for me because I realized that these people are really trying so hard to find the scraps that we threw out from lunch. That really impacted me to see how connected everything is and how much they don't have and just how much they really wanted what we just threw away without thinking. When we came back, did you feel or have any changes for you when we came back?
Well, when I got back, I went through all my stuff at home and got rid of like 3 boxes of my toys and clothes that I didn't want anymore. And I remember before we went, as many of you know, I did not want to go at all. I just thought the idea was I didn't want to go. My mom asked me before we left, is there anything you want to bring to give to the kids down there? And I was like, no. Like, why would I do that? And then I got home. I was like, there was so much I wanted to bring. I wish I would have brought more for them, less for myself. And I looked at all the stuff I had and I was like, I'm giving this, putting it in the garbage when I could have brought it to people down there that would have enjoyed it so much more. And yeah.
So since coming home, have you had any other changes in perspective when hanging out with your friends or different sayings that people say?
Yeah, I've noticed that I get really annoyed when people say I'm starving or I'm freezing, and in my head I'm just like, you really don't know what that's like. Like, even I don't know what that's like. And people use that term, I'm freezing, I'm starving, so loosely when really you have so much food and you don't know even close to what starving or freezing feels like. And there's people all over the world and even just downtown Halifax that are probably starving and freezing 24/7.
So I know this really changed Esther and her perspective. If you had an opportunity to go back, would you go back?
Yeah, like I keep asking my mom, telling Gordon, and I'm moving down with you. I don't care what you say. Book another plane ticket.
So I guess we need to collect some more air miles for that too. Since coming back, one of the things that this evening really stood out for me and was something that, well, the whole trip was really something I'll never forget. And when Shelley had asked me if I would be willing to speak about something and which ministry I'd like to speak about, I said, I don't know which one, because everything is so in such desperate, dire straits. So it's really hard to try and choose one over the other, but this one seemed to stick on my mind even when I came back. And I thought about what we can do here and how we can help out, even in our own community. It's hard for us to ship things down there. Like Maddie and Marta, they buy sweaters out of their own money from the United States, and then that's what they give out. So as soon as they've collected enough money to buy that, they will then give it out on the streets, and that's something that we help them do. But what about here? What can we do while we're here? We have people that are homeless here, and not all of them are choosing to be there. They don't necessarily have a choice, as their circumstances may have led them there. So on Friday night, I put together for a group of us to go out and see what this was like, and if we could do something like what we did in Honduras. So this is the group of us that got together at my house to make sandwiches. And we made probably about 45, 50, 60 sandwiches, somewhere around there. So we went out and took those out on the street at about 6:30, 7 o'clock. We had two different teams. We had a team that was made up of Wayne and Catherine and Caitlin, a girl that is not currently a Life Bridger yet. And they went out and hit Gottingen Street. Now, Caitlin is a little bit different because she used to live on the streets, so she knew all of the areas to go, who to talk to, and where to find people, and how to talk to them. So I know Catherine and Wayne were very grateful for having somebody who knew the people or knew how to connect with people there. It was great. She actually approached a gentleman that was walking with his girlfriend and said, hey, because we had extra scarves, because Nicole graciously donated over 20 scarves and 15 hats. So we took those along with us, and she kind of went up to a stranger and just said, well, they were offering scarves and he didn't really want to take one. And she said, well, how about, would you like a scarf for your girlfriend as a Christmas present? And so he graciously took that and was very happy to have something to give to his girlfriend at Christmas. The other group of us was myself and Nicole and Julie and Maddie and Lindsay, and we all went down Spring Garden Road in Barrington, and we ended up running into the other group as we went around. We didn't find as many people. We only found a few people, but they were more than gracious and really happy that we would give them food. They were very happy with that. There's one gentleman, when we were walking back, on our way down, we saw an empty cart. Well, not an empty cart, a cart with no person, but full of all kinds of recyclables. And we said, well, we don't see anybody with that cart. So we walked down and we said, well, we'll have to look when we come back. On our way back up, we saw a gentleman sitting in Tim Hortons, and we wondered, is this his cart? So Julie and I and Lindsay and Maddie were sitting there, and Nicole was beside us and just kind of listening. We're like, well, I think that's him, but how do we approach somebody and say, hey, is this your cart? Like, are you hungry? And we didn't really know how to do that, but Nicole had no problem. She's a very people person, so she wandered over and was about to go into Tim Hortons, and we're standing there waiting for her to find out, and she turns back and she says, Aunt, bring the sandwiches, hello. So off we go into Tim Hortons, and she taps this gentleman on the shoulder, and he had his head completely down on the counter, obviously very sad. And Nicole just tapped him and said, is that your cart? And he said, yes. And he barely lifted his head, and she said, well, are you hungry? And he said, yeah. So we said, well, we have some sandwiches, what kind would you like? And he was like, oh, what kind do you have? So we offered him some turkey sandwiches, and as we left, she tapped him on the shoulder and said, you know, you have a good night. And we walked out, and all of the sandwiches had written, Jesus loves you, or something inspirational on them. And as we walked out, this man had lifted his head, and he just kind of waved to Nicole as we went by. So it was obviously really touched him, and it was really nice to see that. What we have learned from this experience were, pause. What we did after that, we had a whole bunch of extra sandwiches. We didn't quite find as many people, and we weren't sure because it was so cold how many people went into the shelters. So one group took their sandwiches to a shelter and dropped them off, and the people at the Salvation Army said they will really enjoy this because snack time is over, so there is no more food. So this was a great opportunity to give that. Our group actually was walking up Spring Garden Road, and we saw people standing in the bank machine area, and we were wondering what they were doing. We thought, well, maybe they need a sandwich. So we started to walk over, and they were fairly young, and we realized they were holding hands in prayer. They were doing the same thing, but they were giving out hot chocolate, and they had signs saying free hugs. So they were from, do you remember? New Beginnings. And they knew who we were, so it was really cool to connect with them. We gave them a bunch of sandwiches and then left a bunch with them to give out for that evening. But overall, I think it was a great success. We may not have seen many people, but we did find out a lot more information about when to find them and where to find them. So the next time we go, we're going to set up something a little bit different, a different time to take them out. But yeah, I think that's good.
Thank you guys, because that ministry was one of the toughest, and so, you know, thank you for sharing your emotions with us as well. And I just very quickly want to remind all of you that when you take your recyclables, and please don't forget to take your recyclables to Blue Nose, is that the name of it? Blue Nose Recycling on Mount Edward, Woodlawn? Is it Woodlawn? Woodlawn. And if you don't know where that is, Sherry can tell you. We are going to do up little cards, and we just haven't gotten around to that. But the money that we send there, we have decided that money is going to be designated for the street ministry, so that we can send that down to Natty and Marta, and then maybe when Gordon and Ann are there, we have a conduit to get that money right there, so that they can go maybe more frequently to the street and take sandwiches and juice and sweaters. So please try to remember that you can do your little part in helping out that ministry by remembering to take your recyclables there.
And it's about 150 right now.
Well, it's kind of an interesting way for us to wrap up our series on finances, isn't it? Just to reflect and think through, what am I really doing with my finances account? And I guess as we wrap up this series, I want you thinking through, do you really know where you're at financially speaking? Do you know what's in your account versus what's waiting on your credit card statements? Do you, for instance, do you know that if you went to a store today and you swiped your credit card or your debit card, do you actually have the money already in place to pay that off at the end of the month, or are you actually going deeper into the red? Or do you even know? Or is it so I think I've got sort of a rough idea? And one of the things that we want people thinking through is what is your strategic plan for how you're dealing with your finances? What exactly are you going to do with them? And there's a story of this one lady. She writes this. Let me just read it to you. It says, "My brother-in-law opened the bottom drawer of my sister's bureau and lifted out the tissue-wrapped package. 'This,' he said, 'is not a slip. This is lingerie.' He discarded the tissue and handed me the slip. It was exquisite, silk, handmade, and trimmed with a cobweb of lace. The price tag with an astronomical figure on it was still attached. He said, 'Jan bought this the first time we went to New York, at least 8 or 9 years ago. She never wore it. She was always saving it for a special occasion.' Well, I guess this is the occasion. He took the slip from me and put it on the bed with the other clothes we were taking to the mortician. His hands lingered on the soft material for a moment. Then he slammed the drawer shut and turned to me and said, 'Don't ever save anything for a special occasion. Every day you live is a special occasion. There's never a special enough occasion.'" You know, and there's stories too of people who get these place settings and these very fancy place settings, and they keep saving them and storing them and saying, but waiting for the special meal that will put all this special china out and the crystal out. And then again, after they're long gone, you're unpacking the boxes in the attic and discovering this china or these place settings that were never used. And then people saying, well, we're going to use these now for our family. And just, we need to celebrate now. And I guess the question is money like that? When is money best utilized? Is it when it's saved or when it's spent? Now I want you thinking that through. When is money best utilized? When it's saved or when it's spent? What do you think about that? I'll invite the worship team to come lead us in a song. Oh, sorry, worship team. No, we've got a drama. How valuable is that money, period? When money is sitting in a bank, is it really of any worth? Or is money only really of value when it's being exchanged for something? You know, in this world, we have got billions, trillions, and trillions of dollars that are sitting in bank accounts. And it's absolutely useless and meaningless there. Think of all the good that could be done with money that's sitting, meaninglessly sitting in bank accounts. Now, is that sort of a different way of thinking about things? That money's purpose is to be spent, not stored up. Now, all of you who have any financial background start cringing at There's some balance to this. But I want you thinking the issue through. Money sitting in a bank account is of absolutely no value. Money is only of use when it's exchanged for something that is of value. But I want to come down and think through, what should we be doing with money? What is a wise use for money? For both now and also in the future. There is a future component where we want to plan to spend in the future, and we need to keep that in mind. But that even then, it's money purpose at some point in time in the future. And so what I want to do is I want to come down and think through some biblical principles for money and what we should be doing with that. And I want you thinking through that a lot of people have dreams in life. You probably have had some dreams in your life that have never been fulfilled. And probably the reason that they haven't been fulfilled is because you actually never created a strategic plan to cause them to be fulfilled. Some great desires, wouldn't it be great if we did this? Wouldn't it be great if we did that? But you actually didn't strategize how you're going to get there. When I was, after I taught English in Czechoslovakia for a while, the four of us that were sort of friends or connected over there, we traveled around Europe for a month. And we just had a rough idea of where we're going to go and sort of the loop that we're going to go. But it was all sort of flexible, and nothing was strategically planned. And as a result, we would end up in some cities at night and a hotel, or the hotel would be booked, or the youth hostel would be full. We'd pull up to a campground, and the campground would be either closed or would be full. And there was quite a few times, four of us ended up sleeping in this small little Lada car, Russian-made Lada. Actually, it was a Skoda, the Czech version. And those are really kind of tight and uncomfortable, especially when you got luggage and stuff packed around you. And the end result of us not being strategic in our planning this trip was that we encountered a lot of frustrations. Sure, we saw some cool things, it was neat, but frustrations that just sapped the joy and the excitement away from the trip because we didn't plan for it well enough. And what we want to be thinking is when it comes to your finances, do you have a strategic plan for how you're going to use your finances? Because what happens is if you don't have a strategic plan for your finances, you often end up with less than what you need. And as a result, you don't accomplish many of the things that you, in your mind, would want, things that you would want to do. And so what it means also for us on a spiritual level is that when I am not in control of my finances, and when I don't have a strategic plan for my finances, then I can't also be free then to use my finances for the kingdom of God or for how God may want to use my finances. I'm always just trying to cover things and trying to catch up and catch up and catch up. And it also means that I don't have freed up resources to help other people, like people in Honduras. Like supporting the way, like helping people in our own community or friends or whatever that we know are going through a difficult time, or to just encourage someone or whatever it is. I don't have the freed resources because I'm always playing catch up myself. But see, when you start thinking through strategically your finances, you start to discover, actually, it's like the bank commercial says, you're richer than you think. You're richer than you know. And so what we want to do is we want to think strategically. And I've met some people that have thought through strategic when it comes to finances. I've met some people who decided to take on a second job, not because they needed the money, but because simply they want to use the income from that second job to go towards kingdom purposes, ministry purposes. On the flip side, I've seen people who have strategized their life well enough that they've actually were able to move back to a part-time position and live off what they're making. They lowered their level of income, or they lowered their standard of living, such that they could live off a lesser income than freed up to do ministry themselves. And they could, instead of hiring people in the church, they say, well, hey, I'll work part-time, and I'll support myself financially, and I'll donate then the rest of my time to ministry purposes in the church, so the church didn't have to hire staff. They had free staff, in a sense, in that way. And just because they're thinking through the issues, people I've seen make plans to get out of debt, planning to save money, but money for a purpose, and just how to maximize. What I want to do is I want to give you some wisdom. There's a scriptural wisdom, but maybe a better way to say this is God is giving you some input here on how you should view and approach finances. He has some wisdom that he wants to share with you as far as recommendations about what to do with your finances. And so I put them here. We're short on time, so I'm just going to bounce around, but they're in your inserts here. Proverbs 27:23-24 says, "Be sure you know the condition of flocks. Give careful attention to your herds. For riches do not endure forever, and a crown is not secure for all generations." I mean, essentially what he's saying is, to you people who own businesses, do you really know the state of your business? Do you really know where you're at? Sure, things might be going great here, but have you counted your sheep lately? Like, do you know where you're at financially speaking? Because things don't always stay the same. Do you know where you're really at? And not just from a business perspective. He'd be saying that to us on a personal level. Do you know where you're at? Have you actually sat down and plotted out how much money you're bringing in versus how much you're putting out each month? Do you actually know if you're spending more than you're making? Or is that a big question mark to you? And if it's a question mark, you'd say, you know what, you probably need to take a look at your situation. You need to see where you're really at. Because you know what? You don't know what tomorrow holds. And we need to be thinking some of these things through. He goes on in Luke chapter 14, he says, "Suppose one of you wants to build a tower. Will he not first sit down and estimate the cost to see if he has enough money to complete it? For if he lays the foundation and is not able to finish it, everyone who sees it will ridicule him, saying, 'This fellow began to build but was not able to finish.'" We've all seen some unfinished buildings where people start it, but then the financing falls through and it's an incomplete ruin just sitting on a piece of property. I've seen lots of those. But the question is does that apply to my own personal life too? Now, this passage context is actually talking about the Christian life. Are you really ready to embrace the walk with Christ? And are you counting the cost behind that? Are you willing to say to Jesus, "Everything I have is yours, do with as you wish"? And Jesus is cautioning people before they embrace a relationship with him, saying, have you really thought through the cost of following me? But he's basing that on a financial principle. It says, have you looked at your finances and your strategies and where you'd like to be? Have you really thought that through? Is it realistic? Do you know where your finances are at that sense? So he goes on and he says, Proverbs 13:11, "Dishonest money dwindles away, but he who gathers money little by little makes it grow." And this idea of gathering money little by little, it just says, even a little bit, I'm putting away, putting away, putting away. I am going to store up money. Because what you discover is even if you're storing up a little bit, eventually you'll have something. Or if you're not storing up anything at all. But there's a caution about this idea of storing up. Again, it's not just storing up to have an accumulation of funds. It's storing up so that you can reach your goals. It's storing up so you can strategically spend the money as you feel that you need to spend it. Now, keep in mind, part of that spending is going to be down the road. It might be retirement, it might be college, it might be whatever it is. But you're storing up money so that you can spend it. That you're going to use it for some purposes. He says in Proverbs 21, verse 20, "In the house of the wise are stores of choice food and oil, but a foolish man devours all he has." And basically what he's saying is, wise people, when their income comes in, they look at it and they start realizing, I got to store some, even just a little bit. So I got to be wise with how I use my money. But a foolish person just spends everything they have. A foolish person is a person at the end of the month realizes, I spent more than what I made. And they're devouring everything that they have. And eventually they'll have nothing. And they just keep digging the hole deeper, 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 deeper. So God's saying that's not a really wise approach to things. The wise approach is know what you're making and then control your expenses accordingly. And now Scripture would say, as far as, well, here's what God says with regard to debt. He says, avoid debt as much as you can, as possible. In Proverbs 22:7, "The rich rule over the poor, and the borrower is the servant to the lender." And God never wants us to be in a place where we're controlled by someone else. He never wants us to be in a situation where we are indebted to someone else. He wants us to be rulers of this world. He wants us to be the givers. He wants us to be the blessers. And so what he'd say is, try not to get into a situation of debt, if at all possible. He goes on and says, Romans 13:8, "Let no debt remain outstanding except the continuing debt to love one another. For he who loves his fellow man has fulfilled the law." In other words, if you got debt, work hard to pay the person what you owe. or the corporation what you owe. Make that a priority in your life. Cut your standard of living down as low as you can just so you can pay those debts off, become debt-free. Pay people what you owe them, and don't owe people anything in that sense. Be free from that perspective. And with that, we would say, you know, I always say that credit cards can be your best friend or they can be your worst enemy. I strongly encourage people to get credit cards. Unless you are not disciplined enough to pay off that credit card at the end of each month. If you are not disciplined to pay off that credit card at the end of each month, cut up your credit cards. Go back to the cash-based system where you just take your paycheck, convert it to cash, put it in separate little envelopes, like my grocery envelope, my heating envelope, and whatever it is. And when that money's out of that envelope, it's out of the envelope. You can't spend any more out of that envelope because it's empty, and you cut your spending right there. But if you are able to control your financial spending to the point where you are able to pay off credit cards, then that's get your credit cards. Because you know what? With my credit card, I get tons of air miles. Like you can support Gornana with air miles. You can, whatever it is, you can use. Credit cards can actually give you a lot of perks, but it can be your best friend or they can be your worst enemy, and you need to know where that's at. And the only way you're going to really know that what's at is if you start tracking your income versus your expenses and working through that. And so we do encourage you to think through where you're headed with that. But ultimately, the reason we have money and any resources as a gift of God is that we can care about God's kingdom and His purposes and see His kingdom grow. I am not here to build my palace. The resources God gives me, He says, Rob, you don't need to build a mansion here in this world. I've already built a mansion for you elsewhere. Rob, you don't need to live a life of luxury and comfort. I've already got the life of luxury and comfort prepared for you in heaven. You're here on a mission. Why don't you streamline your mission? What are you really here to accomplish? And is it really comfort? Is it really luxury? I love some things that like Esther was saying. As she comes back, when you see the mission, and where you see how God wants to love people and meet people where they're at, and when you truly get that, you come back and you look at your life and you say, I need to streamline how I'm living here, so that I can show God's love to people who need to be shown in very tangible ways. So listen to what he says, Luke 12:48. From everyone who has been given much, which is us, much will be demanded. And from the one who has been entrusted with much, much more will be asked. Guys, we're the rich, we're the wealthy. You compare us to the people we're serving in Honduras, we are stinking rich. The problem with that is God's going to hold us accountable for that. What have we done with the resources He's given us? Have we just turned around and used it for ourselves and for my comfort and my pleasure? Or are we strategically thinking through, what does God want to do for His kingdom in the broader picture? And am I behind that? Is that a priority for me, or is it just sort of a leftover thing I might do if there's enough money? But you know that never happens, does it? But you can actually strategically plan to have impact for the kingdom of God, financially speaking. You can actually set up your budget that way. It says, I'm making this much money. This much is really going towards just meeting the essential needs, but here's stuff that I spend on things that I want, I don't really need. Maybe I could take some of that and strategically start using it for the kingdom of God. It says, Matthew 6:19, do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth where moth and rust destroy, where thieves break in and steal. But store up for yourselves treasures in heaven where moth and rust do not destroy, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. So it's not saying here that you're not supposed to save up money for retirement. It's not saying you shouldn't save up for... It's saying don't just keep hoarding finances. And we do that. If we have the capability of doing that. We do that because of fear. What does my future hold? Will I be secure? Will I be safe? But if I operate on the principle that God says, Rob, you don't have to worry about tomorrow. I've already taken care of tomorrow. I'll take care of what you need to eat. I'll take care of what you need to wear, where you need to live. He says, Rob, I've got that all figured out. What I want you to do is seek first my kingdom and my righteousness. Rob, make your focus my mission. I'll take care of the stuff. And so, yes, we do save up for things because that's just wise strategic planning. My kids are saving up for universities. I'm not forcing to put you through university. You're all on your own for that one. And so they're already starting to strategically save up towards university. That's a wise thing to do. If they're just saving up money so they can just get this bigger lump sum, I say, no, that's foolish because it's useless. You strategically plan how to spend the money, not how to hoard the money. And that's what this passage is saying is, don't store up for yourselves treasures on earth because it gives you a sense of value, a sense of significance, a sense of security. God says, I'm your value, I'm your security, I'm your future. Use the resources I give you now for purposes now. When LifeBridge first got started, at the end of each year, we had money sitting in the bank. And partly my statement to the elders was, guys, boy, God has really blessed us. Here we are, a church plant, and each year we've got like $10,000 to $15,000 to $20,000 sitting in the bank at the end of the year. How many church plants experience that? And yet God's been blessing us that way, saying, we need to spend this money. And then there's a part of us that say, well, we need to keep a buffer. Well, there's some wisdom to that. But there's a part of it that says, you know, God gave us this. He expects us to use it. God's kingdom doesn't get built when we just throw his money into a bank account. Now, still strategic future planning, but future planning with a plan to spend, not just a hoard. And so, some things to be thinking through here. And I mean, with this, what I do with my own kids is, and I've shared this with you guys before, whenever my kids make any money from a job, we say your first 10% goes straight to God. That's the tithing. Then I've also built in the idea that the second 10% comes back to us as family. There's a sense that you need to have a sense of responsibility for the family you're a part of. Why would we make money and disperse it to everyone else, but when you make money, it just stays with you? Saying, well, no, we're a family. If you make money, there's a certain sense of responsibility you need to have back towards the family. So we say another 10% back to family. But then we also say, now, you need to have another budget line, and they do all this on Quicken, the Quicken Cash Manager program. And they've got another budget line that just says charity. Because we also want them to think through, are you saving up money so that if you want to donate to Honduras, or if you want to donate to World Vision, or if you want to donate to Compassion, whatever it is, do you have some money to donate there? Are you strategically planning to give to charities beyond just your tithing? And so these are things that we're trying to embed in our children at these stages so that when they're out on their own, hopefully some of these disciplines will carry through for them, that they will strategically plan how they will have kingdom impact and how they're going to care about other people. This idea of caring about other people, it's a biblical concept. That's Deuteronomy 25:4. It says, do not muzzle an ox while it is treading out the grain. And basically what's saying is, here, as the farmer is plowing in his field with the ox, it says, you know, as you're gathering, as you're cutting the stuff down, if the ox wants to reach down and eat some of the grain, let it. Care for the creation around you. Care for the people around you. He goes on and says in Leviticus 19:9, whenever you reap the harvest of your land, do not reap to the very edges of your field or gather the gleanings of your harvest. Do not go over the vineyard a second time or pick up the grapes that have fallen. Leave them for the poor and the alien. I am the Lord your God. So what he's saying is, don't be too careful in how you harvest your crops. Because as you leave crops on the edges of the field, the poor can just come along and they can gather what they need to live. Care about the poor. Care about the foreigners. So, but the question is, how do we apply that in today's culture? What do you do with that? As a car mechanic, just leave extra tires laying around? You know, I'm not sure how we apply that, but in terms of how we operate economically with cash, for me the principle is, am I keeping a certain aspect of my budget set aside for people who need the money other than myself? So I actually do that. I have a line item in my budget every month that goes off saying, if someone comes in need, that's where I draw that from. And I just let it build until there's a need that God calls me to be, and I draw from that. And you know what, I can do it. It doesn't affect the rest of my living standards. I have the freedom to help other people because I strategically planned to have the freedom to help other people. Are you doing that? Do you care about what's happening in the kingdom? Are you caring about what's going on? Do you know what God says? This is Jesus saying this. This is going to sound strange to you. I tell you, this is Luke 16:9. I tell you, use worldly wealth to gain friends for yourself. You know, money can buy friends. Is this kind of strange? This is Jesus saying this, by the way. Jesus says, I tell you, use worldly wealth to gain friends for yourself, so that when it is gone, you will be welcomed into eternal dwellings. Isn't that interesting? What are you going to do with that verse? How do you process that one? How do you think that through? Jesus is saying, use your money for people. Use your money to care about people. Use your money to build into other people's lives. And if you are approaching your whole life that way, chances are you're the type of person who's in a heart relationship with God, who's trusting Him to meet your needs as you meet other people's needs. And you'll be welcomed to eternal dwellings. It's not that that saves you, but it's saying that's what describes someone who has an authentic relationship with Jesus Christ does. He cares about people. He cares about the kingdom. So he goes on and just simply says, you know what? Care about those. There's some scriptures in there, though, that say, guard your heart. Don't wear yourself out to get rich. Have the wisdom to show restraint. What are you striving for? Are you actually striving to get rich? God says, that's kind of stupid. Why are you doing that? Why are you striving to get rich? Are you not trusting I will give you what you need every step of the way? Are you not trusting that I will provide for you? Are you getting distracted away from the mission that I have for you? I'll give you everything you need to accomplish what I want you to accomplish. And by the way, so just be careful. Cast but a glance at riches, and they are gone. For they'll surely sprout wings and fly off to the skies like an eagle. I love what it says in Proverbs 30. 2 things I ask of you, O Lord, do not refuse me before I die. Keep falsehood and lies far from me. Give me neither poverty nor riches, but give me only my daily bread. Otherwise I may have too much and disown you and say, who is the Lord? Or I may become poor and steal, and so dishonor the name of my God. You know what? That's kind of a cool prayer, isn't it? God, don't give me too much. Don't give me too little, but also don't give me too much. Don't let me get to a point where I start feeling I'm independent of you, that I'll need to rely on you. Give me my daily bread, God, and I'll be content with that. Let me use the rest of the resources for you and your purposes. The challenge is, do you actually know where you're at? And so we have created a form for you, and we will email this out to anyone who's on our emailing list. If you're not on our emailing list, you can take that connection card and check off, put me on your emailing letter, the newsletter list, and we'll send that out to you. We have a budget forum, as Sean Walker has put this together for us, and it's incredible. Do we have that picture of it there, Dave? We don't have a picture of it. We will send it out to you. Basically, all it is a form. It's for your monthly budget. Just think through what your monthly income is and what your monthly expenses are, and just start strategizing where you want to head with it. That's when you'll discover, are your expenses outweighing your income? And if you do it wisely, and hopefully you'll find that you've got a little bit of extra income as opposed to expenses, and then you start strategically thinking, what does God want to do with this money? Are you actually going to make a difference in people's lives? Are you going to help us get Gordon and Anna down to Honduras so they can be on the streets with these people? And equipping the leaders, and encouraging the leaders, and doing ministry themselves with people. Do you want to support them so you have a place to go down to who will meet you and show you around and help you connect all these things? Do you want to actually start helping support some of these ministries down there? Whatever it is, compassion, sponsorship. But we want to encourage you here that if God discovers you're faithful with what He has given you, you can probably count on the fact that He's going to say, gee, you're being faithful with that. I can trust you with even more. But if you are not being faithful for God's purposes with what you have, the little that you have, God's saying, well, if I can't trust you to use this for my purposes at this amount, there's no way I can trust you with more. And that's a biblical principle that he shares through different stories. He's saying, are you going to be faithful and responsible with what I've given you? Show that to me. Show it to yourself. Then I can trust you with more. Then I'll bless you. But if you're going to keep it to yourself, control it, you do your own plan with it, he says, well, okay, there's no point in me giving you more because I know what you're going to do with it. And that's not really what I'm hoping to accomplish. This is true of businesses too. I really encourage businesses to think through, as a business, is it God's business or is it your business? If God was in control of this business, what would he want to do with your profits? That's a scary one to think through, isn't it? If God was in control of your business, CEO, CFO, what would he recommend do with the profits of your business? We want to encourage you to use some wisdom. If God's speaking to you in any practical way, take your connection card, write it on the back. If there's some accountability step or action step that you want to take, that you want to be reminded of, put it on there. We'll email that action step back to you. If there's something that you want prayer for, wisdom, discernment, you can put that there too, and we'll be praying for you. And we just encourage you to write those things too. Why don't we pray? Father, I want to thank you that you have blessed us here in Canada with so much. And God, we have to confess, we have taken it all for granted. And we have raised our expectations high on how our needs and wants should be met. And yet, Lord, sometimes stories like we heard today radically shape that perspective and call us back to reality in this world. It humbles us. And Lord, I just pray that you would work in our hearts to strategize how we can take life on this earth seriously for your purposes in the short time that we're here. So Father, be at work. I pray this in Jesus' name. Your connection cards can either stay on the seats or at the basket in the back after we're done this.